Have you ever wondered why some people seem to magically transform from middle class earners into multimillionaires almost overnight? Maybe you've scrolled through social media, seeing entrepreneurs posting about their latest $1 million exit, wondering how they went from driving a Honda Civic to owning a Tesla collection in what feels like 5 minutes. Well, here's something that might shock you. The jump from 0 to $1 million is actually harder than going from 1 million to 10 million. And I'm not talking about some motivational fluff here. I'm talking about cold, hard mathematics that most people never understand until it's too late. My name is Nick, and I spend an unhealthy amount of time analyzing wealth patterns and wondering why most people stay broke while others seem to collect millions like Pokemon cards. If you're someone who actually wants to understand how real wealth acceleration works instead of just hoping you'll win the lottery someday, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up changing how you think about money forever. Here's what's fascinating about wealth building, and it's something that goes against everything most people believe. We're conditioned to think that making money is linear. Save $1,000, you're $1,000 richer. Save $10,000, you're $10,000 closer to your goal. Simple math, right? Yeah, wrong. Dead wrong. This kind of thinking is exactly why the vast majority of people never escape the paycheck to paycheck cycle, even when they're earning decent money. The truth is that wealth building follows what mathematicians call an exponential curve, not a straight line. And this exponential nature is precisely why that first million feels impossible while the second million feels inevitable. It's not because millionaires suddenly get smarter or work harder. It's because they finally reach the point where mathematics starts working in their favor instead of against them. Let me paint you a picture of what this actually looks like in real numbers, because most people have never seen these calculations broken down. Imagine you're consistently investing $500 every month with an average return of 8% annually. That's not an unrealistic scenario for someone earning a decent middle-class income who's serious about building wealth. During the first few years, watching your account grow feels like watching paint dry. Your $500 monthly contribution barely seems to move the needle, and those investment returns look pathetic compared to your regular salary. But here's where things get interesting. It takes approximately 25 years of consistent monthly contributions to reach that first $1 million milestone. 25 years. That's longer than most people's entire careers up to that point. No wonder it feels impossible when you're just starting out. During those 25 years, you've personally contributed about $150,000 of your own money. The remaining $850,000 came from compound interest and investment growth. Now, here's the part that blows most people's minds. Once you hit that $1 million mark, reaching the second million takes only about 10 additional years, not 25 years like the first million, 10 years. Same monthly contributions, same investment strategy, but suddenly you're accumulating wealth at more than twice the speed. Why does this happen? Because compound interest is no longer working with pocket change. When you have $100,000 invested and it grows by 8%, that's $8,000 in growth for that year. Nice, but not exactly life-changing. Like when you have $1 million invested and it grows by 8%, that's $80,000 in growth. For doing absolutely nothing, that $80,000 in passive growth is more than many people earn at their actual jobs. This is the moment when wealth building transforms from a grind into something that feels almost magical. Your money starts making more money than you do at work. Every market upturn generates returns that dwarf your monthly contributions. What used to be the most important factor in your wealth building, your personal contributions, becomes almost insignificant compared to the returns your existing wealth is generating. Warren Buffett perfectly exemplifies this principle, and his numbers are so extreme they sound almost fictional. Buffett became a millionaire by age 30, which is impressive, but not unheard of for someone with his business acumen. But here's the shocking part. 99% of Warren Buffett's massive fortune was accumulated after his 56th birthday. Let me repeat that because it's important. 99% of his wealth came after age 56. This isn't because Buffett suddenly became a better investor in his 50s. His investment philosophy and approach remained remarkably consistent throughout his career. The difference was that by age 56, he had enough capital for compound interest to work its magic at scale. When you're working with hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, even modest percentage gains translate into enormous absolute dollar amounts. By 1986, at age 56, Buffett became a billionaire while earning a humble $50,000 salary from Berkshire Hathaway. His salary wasn't making him wealthy, his investments were. By 1989, just 3 years later, he was worth $3.6 billion. He had more than tripled his wealth in 4 years, not through salary increases or working longer hours, but through the mathematical inevitability of compound growth on large amounts of capital. This pattern continued to accelerate. By 1995, his net worth had grown to $10.7 billion. By 1999, it reached $36 billion. Each milestone came faster than the previous one, not because he was getting better at making money, but because he had more money working for him. What makes this even more fascinating is the psychological shift that happens once you cross that $1 million threshold. Before reaching $1 million, every investment decision feels crucial because you're working with limited capital. You might agonize over whether to invest in one stock versus another, or whether to put money in a retirement account or a taxable investment account. These decisions matter, but their impact is relatively small in absolute dollar terms. Once you have substantial wealth, the psychology completely changes. First, you gain access to investment opportunities that simply aren't available to smaller investors. Private equity deals, hedge funds, real estate syndications, and business partnerships often have minimum investment requirements of $100,000 or more. These investments frequently offer better risk-adjusted returns than what's available to retail investors, but they're only accessible once you've accumulated significant capital. More importantly, you can afford to take calculated risks that could generate outsized returns. When you have $50,000 total, investing $10,000 in a speculative opportunity represents 20% of your entire net worth. That's a terrifying proposition for most people. When you have $2 million, that same $10,000 investment represents half of 1% of your wealth. You can afford to make that bet, and if it pays off big, it can accelerate your wealth building even further. This risk tolerance also applies to career decisions. When you have substantial savings, you can afford to leave a stable but limiting job to start a business or pursue a higher paying but less secure opportunity. You have what financial experts call freedom of movement. Your wealth provides options that simply don't exist when you're living paycheck to paycheck. The wealthy also understand something that most people never learn about: assets versus liabilities. During the journey to that first million, successful wealth builders acquire assets that appreciate in value: real estate, businesses, stocks, and other investments that generate income or grow in value over time. These assets don't just sit there doing nothing, they continue generating returns, often at accelerating rates as the underlying businesses grow or property values increase. Meanwhile, people who struggle to build wealth tend to acquire liabilities disguised as assets. The fancy car with the $500 monthly payment, the oversized house with the massive mortgage, the boat that sits unused most of the year. These purchases drain wealth instead of building it, making that first million even more difficult to achieve. But here's what really separates those who reach multiple millions from those who get stuck. It's not just about accumulating assets, it's about understanding how to make those assets work together synergistically. The wealthy understand leverage in ways that completely escape most people's thinking. When you have $1 million in assets, banks suddenly start treating you like their favorite child. They'll lend you money at rates that would make your former broke self weep with envy. Real estate investors call this the snowball effect, but it's really just math wearing a fancy outfit. Let's say you own a rental property worth $500,000 with $200,000 left on the mortgage. Banks will happily let you refinance and pull out cash to buy another property. Now, you own 2 properties generating income, both appreciating in value, both providing tax benefits. Repeat this process a few times, and you're suddenly controlling millions in real estate assets with relatively little of your own money at risk. The tenants are essentially buying these properties for you while you collect the appreciation and cash flow. This is where things get almost comically unfair for people still working on their first 100,000. Banks look at someone with 10,000 in savings asking for a business loan and basically laugh them out of the building, but show up with $1 million portfolio and suddenly you're a valued customer worthy of preferential rates and terms. The system literally rewards you for already having money, which explains why the phrase "the rich get richer" isn't just a saying. It's a mathematical certainty. Business ownership becomes exponentially more accessible once you have substantial capital. Starting a business when you're broke is like trying to build a house during a hurricane. Every mistake could wipe you out completely. But when you have $1 million safety net, you can afford to take the kinds of calculated risks that create generational wealth. Consider the difference between someone investing their last $50,000 into a business venture versus someone investing $50,000 from a multi-million-dollar portfolio. The broke person lies awake at night wondering if they'll lose everything. The wealthy person treats it as a learning experience with upside potential. This psychological difference alone leads to vastly different outcomes because fear-based decisions rarely produce optimal results. The tax advantages multiply dramatically once you cross certain wealth thresholds. Rich people aren't necessarily smarter about taxes. They just have access to strategies that don't make sense at smaller scales. Real estate depreciation, business write-offs, charitable deductions, and sophisticated investment structures all become viable tools for preserving and growing wealth. Here's something that sounds almost too obvious to mention, but most people never think about it. When you have substantial wealth, you can afford to hire experts who specialize in making rich people richer. Tax attorneys, financial advisors, investment managers, and business consultants all cost money up front, but they can save or generate multiples of their fees for clients with significant assets. A tax strategy that saves someone with $100,000 income $2,000 might save someone with $1 million income $20,000. Same strategy, same expert, but the absolute dollar impact scales with wealth. The wealthy also benefit from what economists call information asymmetry. They move in circles where business deals, investment opportunities, and market insights are discussed casually over dinner or golf games. These aren't insider trading schemes, they're just natural consequences of networking with other successful people. When your neighbor owns a successful business and mentions he's looking for investors, you have access to opportunities that never make it to public markets. This social capital compounds just like financial capital. Wealthy people introduce each other to lucrative deals, qualified business partners, and investment opportunities. They serve on boards together, invest in each other's ventures, and share resources in ways that create mutual wealth building. It's not some secret society, it's just what happens when people with money and opportunities naturally gravitate toward each other. Time leverage becomes another massive advantage once you achieve substantial wealth. When you're working paycheck to paycheck, your earning potential is directly tied to the hours you work. Miss a day, lose a day's pay, but when your investments are generating substantial returns, you're earning money while sleeping, vacationing, or pursuing other interests. This time, freedom allows wealthy individuals to focus on activities that compound their wealth rather than just maintaining their income. They can spend time analyzing better investment opportunities, building valuable relationships, or acquiring new skills that increase their earning potential. Meanwhile, people still chasing their first million remain trapped in jobs that pay them just enough to survive, but not enough to truly build wealth. The education factor accelerates dramatically once you have substantial assets to work with. Learning about advanced investment strategies makes sense when you have money to deploy. Studying real estate syndications becomes valuable when you have capital to invest. Understanding business valuations matters when you're in a position to acquire companies. Most educational content about wealth building assumes you're starting with significant capital, which creates a catch-22 for people just beginning that create their journey. The strategy's rapid wealth multiplication require substantial starting capital that most people don't have access to. Geographic arbitrage becomes another powerful tool for the already wealthy. When your income comes from investments rather than a job, you can live anywhere in the world, moving from high-cost areas like San Francisco or New York to lower-cost regions while maintaining the same investment returns can dramatically accelerate wealth building. Someone earning $200,000 annually from investments can live like royalty in many parts of the world, while their costs might represent poverty-level income in expensive cities. This geographic flexibility allows wealthy individuals to optimize their lifestyle costs while maintaining or increasing their income streams. The compound effect extends beyond just financial returns into what behavioral economists call success begets success. Once you've successfully built substantial wealth, you develop confidence and pattern recognition that leads to better decision making. You've proven to yourself that wealth building works, which makes you more likely to stick with long-term strategies during temporary setbacks. This psychological market downturns or advantage cannot be overstated. The person who has never successfully built wealth tends to panic and make emotional decisions during market volatility. The person who has already accumulated millions understands that temporary losses are just part of the process. They buy when others are selling, hold when others are panicking, and maintain their investment discipline when fear dominates the market. All of these factors work together to create what mathematicians would recognize as exponential rather than linear growth. Each additional dollar becomes more powerful than the previous dollar because it has access to better opportunities, lower costs, favorable treatment, and sophisticated strategies. This isn't just some feel-good financial fantasy either. This is mathematical reality playing out in portfolios across the world every single day. The difference between someone with $900,000 and someone with $1.1 million isn't just $200,000. It's the difference between someone still climbing the mountain and someone who's reached the summit and can now use gravity to their advantage. Think about it this way. When you have your first million invested and the market has a decent year with 10% returns, you just made $100,000 without getting out of bed. That's more than the median household income in America for doing absolutely nothing except having money. Yeah, meanwhile, someone with $50,000 invested making the same 10% return earned $5,000. Nice bonus, but not exactly quit your job money. This is where the psychology of wealth building completely shifts gears. Before you hit that $1 million mark, you're constantly thinking about how much you need to save and invest each month. You're calculating how many years it will take, wondering if you're contributing enough, stressing about whether you picked the right investments. It's exhausting because you're doing all the heavy lifting. But once you cross that threshold, the dynamic flips entirely. Your money starts working harder than you do. Those market returns that used to feel insignificant suddenly become substantial enough to cover major expenses or fund entirely new investment opportunities. You stop being the primary driver of your wealth growth and become more like a conductor directing an orchestra that's already playing beautiful music. Here's something that sounds almost criminal but is perfectly legal. Once you have substantial assets, banks start competing for your business in ways that would make your former broke self laugh with disbelief. They'll offer you credit lines at rates that are barely above what they pay on savings accounts. Real estate investors call this using other people's money, but it's really just leveraging your existing wealth to acquire more assets. Let's say you want to buy a rental property worth $400,000. Banks will happily lend you $320,000 at historically low rates because you have $1 million in assets backing up that loan. Now you control a $400,000 appreciating asset while only using $80,000 of your own money. If that property appreciates at just 5% annually, you're earning $20,000 per year on your $80,000 investment. That's a 25% return and we haven't even calculated the rental income or tax benefits yet. The truly wealthy understand something that escapes most people's thinking entirely. They don't just buy assets that appreciate, they buy assets that generate income, which can be used to buy more assets. It's like creating a perpetual motion machine for wealth building, except this one actually works and doesn't violate any laws of physics. Real estate becomes particularly powerful once you have substantial capital because you can start thinking in terms of portfolios rather than individual properties. Instead of buying one rental property and hoping it works out, you can acquire multiple properties across different markets, spreading risk while multiplying income streams. Each property generates cash flow that can fund the down payment on the next property, creating what economists call a positive feedback loop. Business ownership opportunities multiply exponentially when you have serious money to deploy. The difference between investing $50,000 in a business versus investing $500,000 isn't just the extra zero. Larger investments often come with equity stakes, board positions, and influence over business decisions. You're not just hoping the business succeeds, you're actively participating in making it successful. This is where things get almost comically unfair for people still working toward their first 100,000. The best investment opportunities often have minimum thresholds that exclude smaller investors entirely, private equity deals, hedge funds, real estate, syndications, and business partnerships frequently require investments of $100,000 or more. It's like having a VIP section for wealth building that you can only access after proving you already have substantial wealth. So there you have it. The first million is brutal because you're fighting against mathematics, but the second million is inevitable because mathematics finally starts fighting for you. The system rewards those who've already won, which sounds unfair until you realize you can become one of those winners. Start investing consistently today because 25 years from now, you'll either be thanking yourself or wondering what could have been.